There are nights when a single glance changes everything. Ethan was a man who controlled empires but couldn't control his own pride. When he invited his housekeeper to a gala just to win a cruel bet, he never imagined she would walk into that ballroom like a queen, and that every step she took would make him question everything he thought he knew about power, dignity, and desire. What began as a tasteless joke became the night he would never forget. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from right now. Stories like this make us think, how many times have we let pride speak louder than our hearts? How many times have we lost someone important because we were afraid to be vulnerable? If at some point you felt like you lost yourself among the masks you wear every day, I left something in the pinned comment that speaks directly to that. It's not for everyone, only for those who still believe it's never too late to truly start over. The crystal tumbler in Ethan's hand caught the dim light of the chandelier above, refracting amber shards across the marble floor of his penthouse. Outside, the city sprawled beneath him, a canvas of blinking lights and distant sirens, indifferent to the cruelty unfolding in his living room. His so-called friends lounged on Italian leather sofas, their laughter sharp and cutting, the kind that only men with too much money and too little conscience could produce. "You're pathetic, Blackwell," Marcus drawled, swirling his scotch with lazy arrogance. His tailored suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "When was the last time you actually brought someone to one of these galas? You're becoming a hermit in a glass tower." The others joined in, their mockery dressed up as concern. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He'd learned long ago that silence was armor, impenetrable, cold, efficient. "I've got it," Vincent announced, sitting forward with that gleam in his eye that always preceded something vicious. "Take your housekeeper, you know, that girl who cleans your guilt away every morning." He paused for effect, letting the poison settle. "Take Lily to the Morrison Gala, just to see the look on everyone's face." The room erupted. Phones came out. Someone was already typing up a group text. Ethan felt the heat rising in his chest. Not anger, but something worse. Wounded pride, the kind that makes men do stupid things. "Fine," he heard himself say. The word landed like a grenade. The laughter stopped. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "Why not?" Ethan's voice was ice over steel. "She's presentable. It's just one night." But even as he said it, something twisted in his gut. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he hated himself for it. Lily was in the kitchen when he found her, her hands submerged in soapy water, humming something soft and unrecognizable. She wore simple jeans and a faded blue sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that revealed the elegant line of her neck. For a moment, Ethan just watched her. There was something about the way she moved, economical, purposeful, like someone who'd never wasted anything in her life, not even motion. "Lily." She turned, surprise flickering across her face before she caught it, smoothed it away. "Mr. Blackwell." "I didn't hear you come in." He hated that. The formality, the careful distance she maintained, as if he were made of glass and might shatter at the wrong word. "I need to ask you something." He paused, suddenly aware of how ridiculous this was going to sound. "There's a gala this Saturday, the Morrison Foundation charity event. I'd like you to accompany me." The dish in her hand slipped, clattering against the stainless steel sink. She didn't look at him. "I'm sorry?" "As my guest, not—" He cleared his throat. "Not as staff." Now she did look at him, and there was something in those green eyes that he couldn't read. Suspicion? Hurt? Hope? Why? The question was so direct it disarmed him. Most people in his life never asked why. They just took what he offered and ran. "Does it matter?" "Yes." She dried her hands slowly on a towel, her movements deliberate. "It matters to me." For a long moment they just stood there, the kitchen suddenly feeling too small, too warm. Ethan could smell the faint scent of lemon cleaner and something else. Vanilla maybe from her shampoo. It was unsettling, how aware he was of her in this moment. "Because I think you deserve a night out," he finally said. It wasn't the truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. Lily studied him, and he had the uncomfortable sensation of being seen through. "And what do I have to do at this gala?" "Just be there. Just be yourself." She laughed then, a sound with no humor in it. Mr. Blackwell, you don't know the first thing about who I am. The words hit harder than they should have. He opened his mouth to respond, but she cut him off. I'll go, she said quietly. But not because you asked. Because I want to remind myself what it feels like to be treated like more than invisible. She turned back to the sink, dismissing him without another word. And Ethan stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling like he'd just lost an argument he hadn't even known he was having. As he walked back to his study, Marcus's laughter still echoing in his ears, one thought consumed him. What have I just done? Outside, the city continued its indifferent dance. But inside Ethan Blackwell's carefully controlled world, something had shifted. Something he couldn't take back. And the worst part? He wasn't entirely sure he wanted to. The night arrived draped in expectation and expensive perfume. Ethan adjusted his bow tie for the third time in the back of the Mercedes, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. His driver, Robert, knew better than to make conversation. But the silence felt oppressive, heavy with something Ethan couldn't name. When they pulled up to Lily's modest apartment building in a neighborhood his friends would never set foot in, he felt that twist in his gut again. The brick facade was worn but clean, flower boxes in the windows speaking of someone who still believed in beauty despite circumstance. He texted her, "I'm outside." The minutes stretched. Ethan checked his Rolex twice, impatience creeping up his spine. Then the building door opened. Time stopped. Lily emerged like a vision conjured from some forgotten dream. The dress, midnight blue silk that caught the streetlight and transformed it into liquid starlight, moved with her like water, like breathing. It wasn't designer. Ethan's trained eye could tell that immediately. But whoever had made it understood fabric, understood the female form, understood how to make simplicity devastating. The bodice hugged her curves with a respect that designer gowns often lacked, and the skirt flowed to the ground in waves that whispered secrets with each step. But it was the back that stole his breath. An elegant sweep of exposed skin that made his fingers ache with the sudden primal urge to trace the line of her spine. Her dark hair was swept up in a classic chignon, revealing that neck he'd noticed in the kitchen, now adorned with a single silver pendant. Nothing fancy, probably a family heirloom. Her makeup was subtle but transformative, highlighting cheekbones he'd never really noticed, making her green eyes luminous and impossibly deep. She walked toward the car with her head high, and Ethan realized with a jolt that this wasn't confidence born of privilege. This was dignity earned through survival. This was grace, forged in struggle. Robert jumped out to open her door, and even the usually stoic driver couldn't hide his double take. "Good evening, miss," Robert said, and there was genuine respect in his voice. "Thank you," Lily replied softly, sliding into the seat beside Ethan with a rustle of silk. The car door closed. The world shrank to just the two of them and the scent of jasmine, her perfume, delicate and intoxicating. "You look," Ethan started, then stopped, because every word that came to mind felt insufficient. Beautiful was too simple. Stunning was too shallow. You look like you could bring kingdoms to their knees. A flush crept up her neck, painting her collarbone pink. My mother made this dress, years ago, for herself. She never got to wear it to anywhere that mattered. Her fingers traced the fabric with reverence. She taught me that elegance isn't about price tags. It's about knowing your worth. Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. Past tense. The grief was there, subtle but permanent, like a scar that never quite fades. They drove in silence for a while, the city giving way to the manicured estates of the wealthy. Ethan found himself hyper-aware of every breath she took, every small movement. When they hit a pothole and she swayed slightly toward him, her bare shoulder nearly brushing his arm, electricity shot through him so fierce it was almost painful. "Mr. Blackwell." "Ethan," he interrupted. "Tonight, please. Just Ethan." She turned to look at him fully, and in the passing streetlights her eyes were unreadable. "Why are you really doing this, Ethan?" There it was again. That directness that cut through all his carefully constructed walls. He could lie. He should lie. But something about the way she looked at him made deception feel impossible. Because I wanted to prove something, he admitted quietly. To people who don't matter, and I used you to do it. I'm sorry. The apology surprised them both. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then, at least you're honest. That's more than most people give me. You don't have to go through with this, he said suddenly. I can turn the car around. You don't owe me anything. No, she said firmly. I don't owe you anything, but I owe myself this. One night where I'm not invisible. One night where I walk into a room and people see me. She met his gaze steadily. Even if the reason I'm there is a lie, what I do with it will be the truth. The car pulled up to the Morrison estate, all blazing lights and red carpet. Photographers flanked the entrance. Ethan's chest tightened. Ready? He asked. Lily smiled. Small, but genuine. I was born ready. You just never noticed. The door opened. Camera flashes exploded. And Lily stepped out into the light like she owned it. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth and pretension. Crystal chandeliers dripped light like frozen tears, casting prismatic shadows across marble floors polished to mirror shine. A string quartet played Mozart in the corner, their music swallowed by the din of conversation, the particular soundtrack of the privileged discussing things that mattered to no one but themselves. Ethan felt Lily's hand tighten almost imperceptibly on his arm as they entered. Her composure never wavered, but he could feel the slight tremor in her fingers, the only betrayal of nerves beneath that regal exterior. Every head turned. The whispers started like wildfire catching dry grass. Ethan could practically hear the mental calculations happening around them. Who is she? Where did she come from? What designer is that dress? Why haven't we seen her before? Ethan Blackwell. A voice boomed. Charles Morrison, their host, approached with the confidence of old money and older scandals. His eyes swept over Lily with unconcealed appreciation. You've been holding out on us. Who is this vision you've brought to grace our humble gathering? Humble. The man's estate could house a small village. This is Lily, Ethan said, and was surprised at the possessiveness that crept into his voice. Lily, Charles Morrison. She extended her hand with perfect poise. Mr. Morrison, thank you for having me in your beautiful home. Charles kissed her hand with theatrical gallantry. The pleasure is entirely mine, my dear. Any friend of Ethan's is a treasure we've clearly been deprived of for far too long. As Charles moved on, Lily leaned close to Ethan, her breath warm against his ear. He has kind eyes. Lonely but kind. The observation was so unexpected, so perceptive, that Ethan looked at her in surprise. She was right. Charles had been widowed 5 years ago and never quite recovered. You see people, he said quietly. Everyone sees people, Ethan. Most just choose not to look. They moved deeper into the crowd, and Ethan watched something fascinating unfold. Lily didn't shrink or defer or play small. She held eye contact. She smiled with genuine warmth when introduced to strangers. She asked questions that showed she was listening, really listening, to the answers, and people responded to her like flowers to sunlight. Who is she? He heard someone whisper behind him. I heard she's European royalty, incognito. No, I think she's a gallery owner from Soho. Someone said she's a writer. Did you see those eyes? Definitely an artist of some kind. Lily caught snatches of the speculation and her lips quirked in quiet amusement. Should I tell them I'm none of those things? Let them wonder, Ethan murmured. Mystery suits you. Their eyes met, held. Something passed between them in that look, an understanding, a recognition, a spark of something neither could name but both could feel heating the air between them. A photographer approached, camera ready. Mr. Blackwell, can we get a photo of you and your lovely companion? Before Ethan could respond, the man added with a knowing grin. The Morrison Foundation newsletter will want to feature all the notable couples attending tonight. Couple. The word hung there. Dangerous and thrilling. Ethan felt Lily stiffen slightly beside him. He should correct the assumption. He should, of course, he heard himself say instead. Lily's head turned toward him, those green eyes searching his face for something. He couldn't read her expression. Was it disappointment? Resignation? Hope? They posed. The photographer's flash went off. Ethan's hand found the small of Lily's back, his palm against the silk, against the warm skin beneath. She leaned into him just slightly, and the contact sent heat spiraling through his entire body. "Beautiful," the photographer said. "You two look perfect together." As the man walked away, Lily stepped back, breaking contact. The loss of her warmth felt like abandonment. "You didn't correct him," she said softly, not looking at him. "No. Why?" Ethan struggled to find words. "Because in this moment, in this room, maybe it's not a lie." She did look at him then, and what he saw in her eyes made his heart stutter. Vulnerability mixed with something fierce, something that looked dangerously like longing. "Miss Beaumont?" A reporter Ethan recognized from the society pages materialized beside them, recorder in hand. "Amanda Chen, Metropolitan Weekly. I'd love to get a quote from you about tonight's foundation and your relationship with Mr. Blackwell." "I'm not," Lily started. "We're here to support the foundation's important work with underprivileged children," Ethan cut in smoothly. "Lily has a particular passion for educational equity." The reporter's eyes gleamed. "So you two share philanthropic interests? How long have you been together?" The question was a trap, baited and waiting. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. The silence stretched for one heartbeat. 2. Lily's expression shuddered like a door slamming closed. In that pause, in that hesitation, she'd heard everything he didn't say. "Excuse me," she murmured, her voice steady despite the hurt flickering behind her eyes. "I need some air." She walked away, her posture perfect, her dignity intact. But Ethan saw the slight clench of her hand at her side, the only sign she was holding herself together. The reporter was still talking, but Ethan couldn't hear her over the roaring in his ears. He'd failed a test he hadn't known he was taking, and the cost might be higher than he could afford. Lily found sanctuary on the terrace where the December air bit through silk like accusation. The city sprawled below, indifferent to her hurt, its lights twinkling with the false promise of warmth. She wrapped her arms around herself, not against the cold, but against the hollow ache spreading through her chest. Stupid, she thought. Stupid to hope. Stupid to believe even for a moment that tonight meant anything more than what it was. She'd seen it in his eyes when that reporter asked the question. The hesitation, the calculation, the split second where he weighed his options and found her wanting. The glass door behind her whispered open. Lily didn't turn. She knew his footsteps by now. Confident, measured, the walk of a man who'd never had to ask permission to take up space. "Lily, don't." The word came out sharper than she intended. She softened her tone. "Please, just give me a minute." But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Well, a voice like honey laced with arsenic cut through the night. "If it isn't Ethan's latest, what exactly should we call this, darling? Project? Experiment?" Lily turned. A woman stood in the doorway, poured into a red dress that screamed money and whispered cruelty. Her blonde hair was swept into an elaborate updo, her makeup flawless, her smile venomous. Mara Sutton. Lily recognized her from the society pages that sometimes lined the bottom of the birdcage at her old apartment. Heiress, socialite, Ethan's ex-girlfriend, if the tabloids were to be believed. Mara. Ethan's voice was cold steel. "This doesn't concern you." "Oh, but it does." Mara glided forward on Louboutin heels, her gaze raking over Lily with calculated disdain. "You see? I know you, Ethan. I know exactly what this is." She turned to Lily, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Did he tell you about the bet?" The world tilted. "Mara, don't..." Ethan started. "Marcus and Vincent challenged him, didn't they? Said he couldn't show up with someone unexpected. Someone to shock all of us." She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "And here you are, darling, the punchline to their little joke." Lily felt the words land like physical blows. Her vision narrowed, her breath caught. "That's not..." Ethan stepped forward, his face pale. "Lily, it started that way, but..." "But what?" Mara interrupted, relishing every moment. "But you developed feelings? Please." "Ethan Blackwell doesn't have feelings. He has strategies." She looked at Lily with something almost like pity. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, sweetie." But better now than after you've invested real emotion in this charade. Lily's hands were trembling. She clasped them together, willing herself to stillness, to dignity. She would not break. Not here. Not in front of them. Is it true? Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the night like a blade. Ethan's jaw worked. His eyes held hers, pleading. Yes. At first. But Lily, please listen. At first. She repeated the words like they were foreign. Toxic. At first you invited me to humiliate me. To win a bet with your friends. She laughed, hollow and broken. And I thought, God, I actually thought. She couldn't finish. Wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Mara's smile widened. Did you really think a man like Ethan would want someone like you? Look at yourself, honey. Look at where you come from. You're a novelty, a curiosity, something to parade around for shock value and then discard when the entertainment value runs dry. Get out. Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. Get out now, Mara, or I will have security remove you. Temper, temper. Mara blew Lily a kiss. Enjoy the rest of your evening, darling. I hope the fairy tale was worth it. She swept back inside, leaving destruction in her wake. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lily. Ethan reached for her. She stepped back. Don't touch me. Please. Let me explain. Explain what? Her eyes blazed now, fury burning through the hurt. That you used me? That I was entertainment for your wealthy friends? That every moment tonight was built on a lie? Not every moment. His voice cracked, and she hated how much that sound affected her. What I said in the car, what I felt when you walked out in that dress, the way I looked at you tonight, none of that was fake. How would I know? Tears threatened, but she fought them back with pure will. How would I ever know what's real with you? She moved past him toward the door. He caught her wrist, gentle but desperate. Lily, please. She looked down at his hand on her skin, then up at his face. What she saw there, anguish, regret, something that looked dangerously like panic, almost broke her resolve. Almost. Let go of me, Mr. Blackwell. The formality was a knife between them. His hand dropped. Thank you for the evening, she said with devastating politeness. It was very educational. She walked back into the ballroom, her head high, her spine straight. Every eye tracked her movement, sensing scandal like sharks scenting blood. Ethan stood alone on the terrace, the cold finally reaching him, wrapping around him like the consequences of his choices. Inside, Lily kept walking, past the whispers, past the stares, past the photographer who tried to stop her for one more shot. She didn't stop until she was outside in the circular drive, fumbling for her phone to call a car she couldn't afford. And only then, hidden in the shadow of a marble column, did she let one tear fall. Just one. Because Lily Chen had learned long ago that tears were a luxury she couldn't afford, and tonight had already cost her more than she had to give. Ethan stood frozen on the terrace, watching Lily's silhouette disappear into the ballroom like smoke dissolving into air. The cold bit at his skin, but he barely felt it. All he could feel was the emptiness where her presence had been moments before, and the weight of his own stupidity pressing down on his chest like a tombstone. What have I done? Inside, the party continued its oblivious dance. Mozart had given way to something jazzy and upbeat, entirely inappropriate for the devastation unfolding in Ethan's world. He forced himself to move, to follow Lily back inside. But by the time he pushed through the crowd, she was gone. Ethan! Marcus appeared at his elbow, scotch in hand, grin wide. Where's your Cinderella? Don't tell me she's already turned back into a pumpkin. The joke landed like a slap. Ethan turned to face his so-called friend, and something in his expression made Marcus's smile falter. That thing you said, about bringing Lily here. Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. That was your idea of fun? Making a game out of someone's dignity? Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable now. Come on, man, it was just a joke. We didn't think you'd actually... Get out of my sight. The words were ice. And lose my number. We're done. Ethan, don't be dramatic. I said we're done. Ethan stepped closer, and Marcus actually took a step back. You, Vincent, all of you, I'm done pretending that cruelty is sophistication and that having money gives us the right to treat people like props in our entertainment. He turned away, scanning the room one more time for any sign of Lily. Nothing. She'd vanished like a dream upon waking, leaving him to face the harsh light of what he'd done. His phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Miss Chen requested I take her home. I'm returning for you shortly, sir. At least she'd gotten home safely. At least there was that. Charles Morrison materialized beside him, concern creasing his features. Everything all right, son? I saw your young lady leave rather abruptly. She's not... Ethan stopped. What was she? An employee? A date? A woman he'd catastrophically wronged? No, Charles. Nothing is all right. The older man studied him with those kind, lonely eyes that Lily had noticed so immediately. Word of advice from someone who's made his share of mistakes? Whatever you did, fix it. Pride is expensive, Ethan, and some prices aren't worth paying. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. He left without saying goodbye to anyone else, ignoring the curious stares and whispered speculation. Let them talk. Let them wonder. None of it mattered. Outside, the December air felt less like cold and more like punishment. He stood on the steps of the Morrison estate, surrounded by luxury cars and designer gowns, and felt more alone than he'd ever felt in his life. Robert pulled up in the Mercedes. Ethan slid into the back seat where, hours ago, Lily had sat beside him, smelling of jasmine and hope. The drive back to the city was silent except for the hum of the engine and the distant sounds of the world moving on without care for his suffering. Ethan stared out the window, seeing nothing, replaying every moment of the evening in his mind like a horror film he couldn't turn off. The way she'd looked in that dress, the grace with which she'd carried herself, the kindness in her observations about people who'd never shown her kindness in return, the hurt in her eyes when she'd understood what he'd done. How would I ever know what's real with you? The question haunted him because he didn't have an answer. How could he prove sincerity when every action up to this point had been built on deception? When they reached his building, Ethan sat in the car for a long moment, staring up at his penthouse windows glowing against the night sky. The thought of going up there to that empty space full of expensive things and hollow achievements made him physically ill. Mr. Blackwell? Robert's voice was gentle. We're here, sir. Robert? Ethan met the driver's eyes in the rearview mirror. When you took Lily home, how was she? Robert was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Dignified, sir, as always. But, he paused. If I may speak freely, please. I've driven you for 8 years, Mr. Blackwell. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you looked at her tonight. And I've never seen you look as lost as you do right now. Robert's voice was kind but firm. Whatever you did, whatever happened, if she matters to you, don't let pride stop you from making it right. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. Thank you, Robert. He rode the elevator to the penthouse, the mirrored walls reflecting infinite versions of himself, all of them looking equally wretched. The doors opened to his apartment and he stopped cold. Everything looked different. The marble floors he'd always admired seemed cold now, sterile. The modern furniture looked like what it was, expensive but empty, chosen by a decorator who didn't know him and for a man who didn't know himself. He walked to the window overlooking the city, the same view that had seemed so powerful just hours ago when his friends had been here, mocking him into the worst decision of his life. His phone buzzed, a group text from Vincent. Dude, what happened? Marcus said you freaked out. Call us. Ethan deleted the message, then deleted Vincent's contact, then Marcus's. One by one, he removed the people who'd convinced him that having everything meant he had to feel nothing. He poured himself a drink he didn't want and couldn't finish. Sat on a couch that cost more than most cars and felt like sitting on regret. The penthouse had never felt bigger or emptier. Somewhere across the city, in a modest apartment in a neighborhood he'd never visited, Lily was probably trying to forget this night ever happened, trying to erase him from her memory like a mistake. A lapse in judgment, a moment of foolish hope. And Ethan sat alone in his glass tower, surrounded by everything money could buy, finally understanding what it felt like to have nothing that mattered. His phone sat on the coffee table, Lily's number in his contacts. He'd gotten it weeks ago for scheduling purposes, never imagining he'd want to call it for reasons that had nothing to do with work. He picked up the phone, put it down, picked it up again. What could he possibly say? What words existed that could undo what he'd done? "I'm sorry" seemed insufficient. It wasn't supposed to be like this sounded like an excuse. "I think I'm falling for you." Felt like a confession he had no right to make. So he said nothing, did nothing. Sat in the dark of his expensive prison and let the silence teach him what his wealth never could, that some things, once broken, don't know how to be fixed. Outside, the city lights continued their indifferent dance, not caring that somewhere in their midst a man was finally learning the cost of his cruelty. And it was a price he didn't know if he could afford to pay. Morning came without permission, dragging Ethan from a sleep that had been more punishment than rest. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny accusations in the air. He'd dreamed of midnight blue silk and green eyes full of disappointment, waking with the phantom scent of jasmine still clinging to his senses. His phone showed 15 missed calls and twice as many messages, none from the only person he wanted to hear from. Ethan made coffee he couldn't taste and stood at the window, watching the city wake up to a Sunday that cared nothing for his crisis. Somewhere out there, Lily was probably starting her day off, maybe sleeping in, maybe trying to forget last night ever happened. The thought of her hurting because of him made his chest physically ache. He pulled up his messages, scrolling past the group chat he'd left. Marcus had sent individual texts throughout the night. "You're overreacting, she's just a housekeeper. We can find you someone better." The words made Ethan's blood boil. Someone better. As if Lily were a commodity to be upgraded, a purchase to be returned. He blocked the number. Then he did something he should have done months ago. He opened the group chat history and read. Really read. Scrolled back through weeks of messages, seeing with fresh eyes what he'd been too blind or too complicit to notice before. Ethan's got himself a pretty little maid. Wonder if the uniform comes off as easily as it goes on. $20 says she's working there hoping to land a rich husband. Gold digger training program. Maybe we should all hire hot housekeepers. Make Monday mornings more interesting. The messages went on, and on. Crude jokes about Lily's appearance. Speculation about her motives. Mockery of her circumstances. And through it all, Ethan's own responses. Laughing emojis, non-committal replies, silent agreement. He'd told himself it was harmless. Just guys being guys. Locker room talk that meant nothing. But it had meant everything to the woman on the receiving end of their joke. It had meant humiliation, betrayal, the confirmation that she was exactly what she'd feared. Invisible except as entertainment for people who would never see her as equal. Ethan's hand trembled as he held the phone. The nausea wasn't from the scotch last night. It was from the man he saw reflected in those messages. A man who'd let cruelty slide under the guise of friendship. A man who'd valued fitting in over standing up. A man who'd treated a woman's dignity as the punchline to a bet. "You're better than this," his father's voice echoed in his memory. Joseph Blackwell had built an empire, yes, but he'd done it with integrity. He'd taught Ethan that real power wasn't the ability to crush people. It was the choice to lift them up. When had Ethan forgotten that? He knew the answer. It had been gradual. A compromise here. A blind eye there. Surrounding himself with people who made him feel superior instead of people who made him want to be better. Choosing comfort over character so many times that he'd lost track of who he'd intended to be. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Mr. Blackwell." A woman's voice, professional but cold. "This is Amanda Chen from Metropolitan Weekly. I'm following up on last night's gala. I have some questions about your relationship with Lily Beaumont." Beaumont. Lily had given the reporter a fake last name. Of course she had. She'd been protecting herself even as she'd walked into the lion's den with him. "No comment," Ethan said. "I see. Well, I should tell you that we've received some interesting information from anonymous sources about the nature of your arrangement. Would you like to respond before we run the story?" His jaw clenched. Marcus. Or Vincent. Or Mara. Maybe all three. They'd weaponized the truth, turning Lily's humiliation into gossip column fodder. "Listen to me very carefully," Ethan said, his voice dropping to the tone he used in boardrooms when negotiations went south. "If you print one word about Lily without her consent, I will bury you and your publication in lawsuits. I will buy your parent company just to fire you personally. Do you understand? Silence on the other end. Then, that sounds like a threat, Mr. Blackwell. It's a promise. Lily's privacy is not for sale. Neither is her story. If you have questions about me, ask me. Leave her out of it. He hung up before she could respond. His hands were shaking. Adrenaline and fury and something else. Purpose, maybe. The first clear sense of what he needed to do. He couldn't undo last night. Couldn't erase the hurt he'd caused. But he could stop it from getting worse. And he could make damn sure the people who'd orchestrated this humiliation faced consequences. Ethan pulled up his contacts. First call. His lawyer. Richard, I need you to draft severance of partnership agreements, everyone. Marcus Chen, Vincent Torres, the whole group. I'm out of every joint venture, every investment, every deal we have together. Ethan, that's going to cost you millions. I don't care. Do it. Second call. His PR team. I need a statement prepared. Make it clear that any reporting on my personal life that involves Lily Chen is fabricated and will be met with legal action. Third call. His accountant. I want to set up a trust fund. Private, anonymous, educational and medical expenses for... He paused, realizing he didn't know enough about Lily's life to know who needed help. Her brother, her family. I'll get you the details. When he finished the calls, the sun was higher, the city fully awake. Ethan felt exhausted but strangely lighter. Action, even incomplete action, was better than the paralysis of guilt. But there was one more call to make. The hardest one. He found Mara's number and pressed dial. Ethan, she answered with false sweetness. I hope you're not calling to yell at me. I was just being honest with that poor girl. You were being cruel, he said evenly. And you did it to hurt me, not to help her. Oh, please. I'm calling to tell you that you're no longer welcome at my properties. The Hamptons house, the ski lodge, any event I host or attend. You're done, Mara. Her laugh was sharp. You're banning me? For what? Telling the truth? For enjoying someone else's pain? For using information as a weapon? For being exactly the kind of person I'm ashamed I ever associated with? He paused. We're done. Don't contact me again. He ended the call before she could respond. The silence that followed felt different than last night's silence. This one had teeth. This one demanded action beyond phone calls and damage control. Ethan pulled up Lily's contact information. Her address stared back at him from the screen. He could go there, knock on her door, try to explain. But what right did he have to force his apologies into her space? To make her comfort him through his guilt? No. If he was going to fix this, it had to be on her terms, in her time. But he could at least try to repair some of the damage. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Purpose replacing paralysis, determination drowning out doubt. He had no idea if Lily would ever forgive him, but he knew with absolute certainty that he had to try. Because somewhere between a cruel bet and a woman in midnight blue silk, Ethan Blackwell had started to become someone different. Someone who finally understood that power without compassion was just cruelty in an expensive suit. And he was done wearing that suit. The garden behind Ethan's mansion had always been Lily's favorite place to work. Not because it was beautiful, though it was, with its geometric hedges and seasonal blooms arranged by a landscape architect who charged more per hour than Lily made in a week. She loved it because it was honest. Plants didn't lie. They either thrived or withered. They showed you exactly what they needed and exactly what happened when you neglected them. Unlike people. Unlike men in expensive suits who made you feel seen and then reminded you that you were merely scenery in their world. Lily knelt in the dirt near the rose bushes. Her jeans already stained, her old sweater loose and comfortable. She'd come back to work because she needed the money, plain and simple. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, not with her brother's medical bills piling up and rent due next week. But she'd come early before Ethan typically woke, and she'd leave before he emerged from whatever cave wealthy men hibernated in after destroying people's dignity. She was pruning dead growth from a climbing rose when she heard footsteps on the stone path behind her. Her entire body tensed. Lily. His voice. Of course it was his voice. The universe had a cruel sense of timing. She didn't turn around, didn't stop working. Mr. Blackwell, I didn't expect you up this early on a Sunday. I couldn't sleep. Guilty conscience? The words came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't take them back. Silence. Then, yes. The honesty surprised her enough that she paused, her pruning shears hovering over a brown stem. She still didn't turn around. Lily, please. Can you look at me? Why? So you can practice your apology? Perfect your delivery before you move on to the next person you've wronged? She cut through the dead wood with more force than necessary. No. So I can see your face when I tell you that I'm sorry. So you can see mine and know that I mean it. Against her better judgment, Lily stood and turned. What she saw stopped her prepared defenses cold. Ethan looked wrecked. His hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it for hours. He wore jeans and a simple black sweater. No armor of designer suits today. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked younger somehow, and infinitely more human. I'm sorry, he said, and his voice cracked on the words. I'm so sorry, Lily. For the bet. For not defending you to that reporter. For every moment I let my friends make you into a joke. For using you to prove something to people whose opinions shouldn't have mattered. Lily's grip tightened on the pruning shears. Do you want absolution, Mr. Blackwell? Because I can't give you that. I don't want absolution, I want... He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I want you to know that I see what I did. I see the harm. And I'm trying to fix it. You can't fix humiliation. You can't undo the fact that I walked into that ballroom thinking maybe, just maybe, someone saw me as more than my circumstances. And then discovered I was exactly what I feared, entertainment for the wealthy. You were never entertainment to me. He took a step closer. From the moment you stepped out of that car, you were, God, Lily, you were everything. And I was too cowardly to say it when it mattered. Words are cheap, Ethan. She used his first name deliberately, a small act of defiance. Especially from men who've never had to worry about the cost of anything. He flinched, but didn't retreat. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket. An envelope. Simple, white, unsealed. You're right. Words are cheap. So I'm going to shut up and show you instead. He held out the envelope. Lily stared at it like it might contain poison. What is that? Open it. I don't want your money. It's not my money, not really, just, please, open it. Her hands were shaking as she took the envelope. Inside she found documents. Legal documents. She scanned them, her heart pounding harder with each line. The Lily Chen Educational and Medical Trust Fund. Established 3 hours ago, according to the timestamp. Funded with an amount that made her vision blur. Designated for educational expenses and medical costs for Lily Chen and her immediate family. No strings attached, no repayment required. Managed by an independent trustee. Your brother's treatments, Ethan said quietly. Your education, if you want to go back to school. Whatever you need. It's yours. No conditions. Lily's hands trembled. The papers rustled. Why? Because I can't undo what I did, but I can make sure the consequences of my actions don't define the rest of your life. He swallowed hard. Because you mentioned your brother needed treatment and I heard the worry in your voice. Because you deserve to chase dreams instead of just surviving. Because... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Because seeing you kneel in dirt to pay for necessities while I throw money at luxuries makes me physically sick. Tears burned behind Lily's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This doesn't fix what happened. I know. This doesn't make us friends. I know. This doesn't mean I forgive you. I know. His eyes held hers, steady and honest. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Lily. I'm asking for the chance to prove that I'm not the man I was on Saturday night. That I can be better. That I want to be better. Why? The question came out as a whisper. Why does it matter what I think of you? Ethan stepped closer, near enough that she could smell his cologne. Cedar and something crisp, expensive but understated. Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me and seen past the money. Who's called me on my bullshit. Who's expected more from me than I expected from myself? He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed a smudge of dirt from her cheek, the touch feather-light and reverent. Because when you walked away from that gala with your head held high, he continued, his voice rough with emotion, you showed me what real strength looks like, what dignity means. And I realized I'd spent years mistaking wealth for worth, power for character. Lily's breath caught. His hand lingered near her face, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. I cut ties with Marcus, Vincent, all of them, he said. Ended every business partnership, banned Mara from my properties, called my lawyer, my PR team, my accountant. Spent the morning burning bridges I should have burned years ago. Ethan, I'm not telling you this for credit. I'm telling you so you know that I'm trying, that I heard you, that when you said I should have acted like you mattered, you were right. You do matter. More than I knew how to express in that moment. The envelope felt heavy in Lily's hands. Heavy with possibility, with the weight of choices she'd never had before. Her brother could get the surgery he needed. She could finish her degree. She could stop working 3 jobs just to stay afloat. But accepting it meant accepting him back into her life in some capacity. Meant acknowledging that this gesture, grand as it was, touched something in her heart she'd tried to protect. I need time, she said finally. To think, to process, to figure out what this means. Take all the time you need. Relief flickered across his features. I'm not going anywhere. And Lily, you don't work for me anymore. If you want to keep tending the garden, it's because you want to, not because you have to. I'll pay you as a consultant, proper rate, proper respect. Or you never have to see me again, your choice. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The reporter from last night. She won't be printing anything. I made sure of it. Your privacy is yours. He walked away, leaving Lily standing in the garden with dirt on her knees and documents in her hands and her heart doing complicated things in her chest. She looked down at the trust fund papers, then at the roses she'd been pruning. Dead growth removed, new blooms waiting to emerge. Maybe, she thought, maybe some things could grow back after being cut down. Maybe. 3 days passed like seasons changing, slow but inevitable. Lily returned to the garden each morning, not because she needed to anymore, but because the roses needed her. And maybe, if she was honest with herself, because she needed the space to think, to sort through the tangled mess of emotions Ethan had left behind like a storm's aftermath. He kept his distance, true to his word, but she felt his presence in small gestures that appeared like gifts from an invisible hand. Fresh coffee waiting in the garden shed, still hot, exactly how she took it. The broken gate on the rose arbor, mysteriously repaired. A new set of professional-grade pruning tools where her old, battered ones had been. Never ostentatious, never demanding acknowledgement. Just there. On Thursday afternoon, as autumn light painted the garden gold and the air carried the first real bite of winter, Lily was adjusting the trellis for the climbing roses when she heard the gate creak. She turned. Ethan stood at the entrance to the garden, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen him look. Like a man standing at the edge of something vast and unnamed, unsure if the ground would hold. Hi, he said simply. Hi. They looked at each other across 20 feet of carefully tended earth, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. I was thinking, Ethan started, then stopped. Tried again. Would you like to take a walk? Just walk. No expectations. No agendas. Just 2 people existing in the same space without all the weight of everything else. Lily studied him. He looked different in the afternoon light, softer somehow, less the polished businessman, and more the man beneath. She could say no. Should say no, probably. Protect herself from the inevitable disappointment, but there was something in his eyes. Vulnerability. Hope. The kind of raw honesty that's impossible to fake. Okay? She heard herself say. They walked side by side through the garden paths, their footsteps crunching on gravel, the silence between them surprisingly comfortable. Lily was acutely aware of his proximity, the breadth of his shoulders, the way his hands almost brushed hers as they walked, the rhythm of his breathing matching hers. "I talked to your brother's doctor," Ethan said quietly. Lily stopped walking. "You what?" "Through the trust administrator," he clarified quickly. "Everything confidential, everything professional. The surgery he needs, they can schedule it for next month. The surgeon is one of the best in the country. I wanted you to know it's real. The fund isn't just paperwork." Emotions swelled in Lily's chest. Gratitude, frustration, something dangerously close to tenderness. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." He turned to face her fully. "Your brother's name is Daniel, right? He's 16. Loves basketball even though he can barely walk to the end of the block right now. Dreams of being a physical therapist so he can help people the way he wishes someone could help him." Lily's breath caught. "How do you know that?" "You told me. Months ago when I asked why you worked so many jobs. You were washing dishes and you got this look on your face. This mix of love and fear and determination. You said, 'My brother deserves to chase his dreams and I'm going to make sure he gets that chance.'" Ethan's voice was soft, reverent. "I remembered because it was the first time I realized you were carrying a whole world on your shoulders and still managing to smile." Tears pricked at her eyes. "I didn't think you were listening." "I'm always listening when you talk, Lily. I just didn't know how to show it before." The wind picked up, sending leaves skittering across the path. A strand of hair escaped Lily's ponytail, dancing across her face. Before she could brush it away, Ethan's hand was there, his fingers gentle as they tucked the strand behind her ear. The touch was electric. His fingertips lingered against her cheek, warm and slightly calloused. Evidence that he'd been doing something with his hands lately. Something other than signing checks and making calls. "What have you been doing?" she asked, nodding toward his hands. He looked down, almost embarrassed. "Woodworking. I found my grandfather's old tools in the basement, started making things. Badly, mostly. But it helps me think. Helps me remember that value isn't just about money. It's about what you can create with your own two hands." Lily reached out without thinking, taking his hand in hers, examining the small nicks and new calluses. The intimacy of the gesture struck them both simultaneously. Their eyes met, held. "Ethan," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. He seemed to understand anyway. His other hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me this is too much, too soon, and I'll walk away. I'll give you all the space you need." But Lily didn't want space. Not anymore. Not when his touch felt like coming home to a place she'd never known she was searching for. "Don't stop," she breathed. The world seemed to hold its breath. Ethan's eyes searched hers, looking for permission, for certainty, for truth. Whatever he found there made him close the distance between them with aching slowness, giving her 1,000 chances to pull away. She didn't. When his lips finally met hers, it was nothing like she'd imagined. It was better. Gentle but urgent, asking and answering simultaneously. His hand slid into her hair, the other settling at the small of her back, pulling her closer. She melted into him, her own hands finding their way to his chest, feeling his heart thundering beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, months of tension and longing pouring into the connection. He tasted like coffee and promises, like everything she'd tried not to want. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you," he confessed, the words trembling between them. "I've been falling since I saw you in that dress. Maybe even before. And I'm terrified because I've never felt like this. Like I'd burned down my whole world just to see you smile." Lily's hands fisted in his sweater, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning universe. "Ethan, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I'm not asking for words, I need you to know. I need you to understand that this isn't gratitude or obligation or some twisted attempt at redemption. This is just you. The way you see the world. The way you make me want to be better. The way you feel in my arms like you were made to be there." The afternoon sun slanted through the trees, painting them both in amber light. Lily looked up at this man who'd hurt her and was trying desperately to heal her. This man who'd shown her cruelty and was now offering tenderness. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too. What if this is a mistake? What if it's not?" She had no answer to that. So instead of speaking, she pulled him down for another kiss, this one her initiation, her choice, her claim. He responded with a groan that vibrated through both of them, his arms tightening around her, like he was afraid she might disappear. When they finally broke apart, the garden around them seemed different, softer, full of possibility. "Stay for dinner," Ethan said, his voice still rough from kissing. "Let me cook for you. Let me show you that I can be more than what you saw at that gala." Lily smiled, small but genuine. "You cook?" "Badly, but with great enthusiasm." His grin was boyish, charming, completely disarming. "Please? I promise not to poison you." "Probably," she laughed, the sound surprising them both. "Okay, but I'm supervising. I've seen your kitchen. It's too beautiful to be destroyed by culinary incompetence." They walked back to the house together, his arm around her shoulders, her hand at his waist. The gesture was casual, natural, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. And as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Lily realized that maybe, just maybe, some risks were worth taking. Even the ones that terrified you, especially those. Lily woke to unfamiliar softness. Egyptian cotton sheets, a mattress that felt like floating on clouds, and the faint scent of cedar and bergamot that she'd come to associate with Ethan. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. Dinner had been a beautiful disaster. Ethan had indeed cooked with more enthusiasm than skill, managing to burn garlic bread while undersalting pasta, all while making her laugh so hard her stomach hurt. They'd eaten at the kitchen island instead of the formal dining room, trading stories like currency, learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with employer and employee, everything to do with man and woman. He'd told her about his father, who'd died when Ethan was 25, leaving him an empire and no instruction manual on how to be human while running it. She'd told him about her mother, who'd sewn dreams into fabric and taught Lily that elegance was a state of mind, not a price tag. They'd talked until the wine bottles were empty and the moon was high, and when Lily had checked the time and realized it was past midnight, Ethan had quietly offered her the guest room. "Stay," he'd said simply. "It's late. Let me drive you home in the morning. Or, don't go at all." The last part had been barely a whisper, weighted with hope and fear in equal measure. She should have left. Should have maintained boundaries, protected herself, remembered that trust took time to rebuild. But instead, she'd looked into his eyes and seen something that terrified her. Genuine care. The kind that didn't calculate, didn't measure cost and benefit, just was. "Okay," she'd breathed. He'd led her upstairs, shown her to a guest room decorated in soft blues and creams. Professional, respectful. He'd brought her one of his t-shirts to sleep in, turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Lily?" "Yes? Thank you. For giving me another chance. For seeing past who I was to who I'm trying to become." She'd wanted to respond, but before she could find words, he was gone. The door clicking softly shut behind him. Lily had changed into his shirt. Soft cotton that smelled like him, falling to mid-thigh, and climbed into the massive bed. She'd expected to lie awake, overthinking every decision that had led to this moment. Instead, she'd fallen asleep almost immediately, more at peace than she'd been in years. But she hadn't stayed in the guest room all night. Sometime in the dark hours before dawn, she'd woken with a clarity that felt like destiny. She'd padded down the hallway in bare feet, her heart pounding until she found his door. It had been ajar, like an invitation, or maybe just hope left unlocked. He'd been awake, sitting by the window overlooking the city, wearing only sleep pants, his torso bare and limbed in moonlight. He'd turned when she entered, surprise and longing warring on his face. "Lily?" She hadn't trusted herself to speak. Instead, she'd crossed the room and taken his hand, letting her presence be the answer to questions neither of them had voiced. He'd stood slowly, searching her eyes. "Are you sure?" I've never been more sure of anything. What followed had been tender and fierce all at once. Ethan had touched her like she was precious, like she might break, until she'd pulled him closer and shown him she was stronger than he knew. They'd learned each other in the language of skin and breath and whispered names, every touch erasing the memory of hurt, every kiss writing new stories on old wounds. When they finally collapsed together, tangled in sheets in each other, Ethan had pulled her close and pressed his lips to her temple. "I love you," he'd whispered into her hair, the confession raw and unguarded. "I know it's too soon. I know I don't deserve to say it yet, but I love you, Lily, and I'm going to spend every day proving I'm worthy of you." She'd turned in his arms to face him, her hand coming up to trace the line of his jaw. "You don't have to be worthy. You just have to be real. Be honest. Be the man I see when you think no one's looking. The one who remembers what I say about my brother, who repairs gates he thinks I won't notice, who burns garlic bread and laughs at himself for it. I can do that," he'd promised. "I want to do that. With you. For you." They'd made love again, slower this time, with the patience of people who finally understood they had time. And afterward, wrapped in each other's warmth, they'd fallen asleep as dawn began to paint the sky. Now, in the full light of morning, Lily opened her eyes to find Ethan watching her, propped up on one elbow, his expression soft with wonder. "Good morning," he said, his voice sleep-rough and intimate. "Good morning." She smiled, suddenly shy despite everything they'd shared in the darkness. He reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture already familiar, already theirs. "I was afraid you'd wake up and regret this." "Regret me? Do I look like I regret anything?" His smile was pure relief, pure joy. "No. You look like you belong here. In my bed. In my life. In every moment from now until forever. If you'll have me." Lily's breath caught at the magnitude of what he was offering. Forever. The word hung between them, enormous and terrifying and thrilling. "Ethan, I—" A soft knock interrupted her. They both froze. "Mr. Blackwell?" Robert's voice, discreet and professional, came through the door. "I apologize for the intrusion, but Miss Chen's phone has been ringing. Her brother's hospital has called 3 times. I thought it might be urgent." The real world came crashing back. Lily sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest, fear replacing warmth. "Daniel." Ethan was already moving, grabbing his phone from the nightstand, pulling on a shirt. "Use my phone. Call them back." Lily's hands shook as she dialed the hospital, dread pooling in her stomach. But when the nurse answered and explained the situation, the dread transformed into shock, then tears. "They want to move up his surgery," she said, lowering the phone, her voice breaking. "They had a cancellation. They can do it tomorrow if we can be there by noon today to prep. They said the donor organ became available ahead of schedule, and if we don't take this slot, it might be months before another chance." Ethan was already pulling on jeans. "Then we go. Now. I'll have the jet ready in an hour." "Ethan, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm offering. Lily, this is your brother's life. Nothing else matters right now." He cupped her face in his hands. "Let me do this. Let me be there for you. Not as the man who wronged you, but as the man who loves you and wants to support you through this." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm scared. I know. But you don't have to be scared alone. Not anymore." Within an hour they were in Ethan's car, racing toward the private airfield. Lily had thrown on her clothes from yesterday, Ethan had grabbed essentials, and Robert drove with the practiced efficiency of someone used to mobilizing at a moment's notice. As they lifted off, the city shrinking below them, Ethan held Lily's hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. A silent promise that whatever came next, they'd face it together. She leaned her head on his shoulder, exhaustion and anxiety and hope swirling through her. Last night she'd fallen asleep in his arms. This morning she was flying across the country with him to save her brother's life. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always," he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "For you? Always." And as they flew toward uncertainty, Lily realized something profound. She wasn't just letting Ethan into her life. She was choosing him, actively, consciously, with full knowledge of his flaws and full faith in his capacity to be better. That wasn't surrender. That was strength. The kind her mother had taught her. The kind that knew when to fight and when to trust. And right now, in this moment, with her hand in his and hope in her heart, Lily chose to trust. The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Lily sat with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white, her leg bouncing with nervous energy she couldn't contain. Ethan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of her fear. Daniel's surgery had been underway for 3 hours. 3 hours of watching the clock, counting minutes, imagining worst-case scenarios her rational mind knew were unlikely, but her heart couldn't stop conjuring. "He's going to be fine," Ethan said quietly. "Not for the first time." "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it, and I believe in him. From everything you've told me, your brother is a fighter." Lily turned to look at him, really look at him. He'd been awake for nearly 24 hours, had rearranged his entire schedule without complaint, had sat in this uncomfortable chair for hours without once checking his phone or showing impatience. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and he'd never looked more beautiful to her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Really? You've already apologized, already set up the fund, already proved you're sorry. You don't have to sit in a hospital waiting room with me." Ethan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Do you remember what you said to me in the garden? About wanting me to apologize as Ethan, not as your employer?" She nodded. "I'm not here as the man who hurt you or the man trying to make amends. I'm here as the man who loves you, as someone who wants to be there for the hard moments, not just the easy ones." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "I'm here because when someone you love is scared, you don't leave them to face it alone. You sit with them. You hold their hand. You remind them they're not carrying the weight by themselves." "Ethan, let me finish." His thumb stroked the back of her hand, the gesture soothing. "I've spent most of my life thinking that power meant control, that success meant never showing weakness, that relationships were transactions where you calculated value and managed risk." He paused, his voice growing thick. "And then you walked into my life and showed me that real strength is vulnerability, that real success is connection, that love isn't a transaction. It's a choice you make every single day to show up, to be present, to give without expecting return." Tears blurred Lily's vision. "When did you become so wise?" "When I met a woman who saw through every defense I'd built and loved me anyway, despite having every reason not to." Before Lily could respond, a surgeon in blue scrubs emerged through the double doors. They both stood instantly, hope and terror warring on their faces. "Miss Chen?" The surgeon smiled, and relief crashed over Lily like a wave. "The surgery was a complete success. Daniel's vitals are strong. The transplant took beautifully, and barring any complications, he's looking at a full recovery." Lily's legs gave out. Ethan caught her, his arms coming around her as she sobbed into his chest. Relief and joy and the release of months, years, of fear she'd been carrying. "Can I see him?" she managed when she could speak again. "He's in recovery now. Give us another hour to get him settled, and then you can sit with him." When the surgeon left, Lily pulled back just enough to look up at Ethan. His own eyes were wet, and the sight of him crying for her brother, for her, broke something open in her chest. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "I love you, Ethan, not because of the fund or the jet or any of this, but because you're here, because you stayed, because when I needed someone, you didn't just throw money at the problem. You showed up as a person, as a man who cared enough to sit in an uncomfortable chair and hold my hand and believe in my brother's strength." Ethan's laugh was watery, joyful. "Say it again. I love you." "Again. I love you, you ridiculous man." He kissed her then, there in the hospital waiting room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and a game show playing on the waiting room TV. It was messy and tearful and perfect, a kiss that tasted like salt and relief and the beginning of something neither could name, but both recognized as real. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want you to be my employee anymore." Lily stiffened slightly. "Ethan, let me rephrase. I don't want there to be any power imbalance between us. I want us to be equals, partners. He pulled back to look at her properly. "So I'm officially terminating your employment, effective immediately." And then, as Ethan Blackwell, the man, not the employer, not the millionaire, just the guy who's completely in love with you, I'm asking if you'll let me be part of your life. Your real life, not as someone who works for me, but as someone who chooses to be with me. Understanding dawned, warm and bright. "You're firing me so you can date me? I'm freeing us both from roles that don't fit who we are to each other anymore." His smile was soft, hopeful. "What do you say, Lily Chen? Will you take a chance on an ex-employer who's desperately trying to become a better man?" She pretended to consider, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "Well, I suppose I could give you a trial period. See how you perform in the role of boyfriend. Though I should warn you, I have very high standards. I would expect nothing less. And I won't tolerate any more cruel bets or wealthy friend groups who treat people like entertainment. Already handled. You're looking at a man who's down to one real friend, Robert, and a business partner in Tokyo who respects boundaries. And you'll have to meet Daniel properly. As my boyfriend, not as the man who funded his surgery. He's going to be suspicious of your intentions. I welcome his scrutiny. I want to earn his trust the same way I want to earn yours. One day at a time, one choice at a time." Lily's smile softened. "Then yes. Yes, I'll take a chance on you. On us. On whatever this becomes." They sat back down, this time with Lily curled into Ethan's side, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. They stayed that way for the hour it took before they could see Daniel, talking quietly about nothing and everything. Her dreams of finishing her art history degree, his idea to turn part of his fortune toward funding scholarships for underprivileged students, their shared love of old movies and terrible puns. When a nurse finally came to get Lily, Ethan stood to go with her but paused. "Do you want me to wait here? Give you time alone with your brother?" Lily took his hand, squeezing gently. "No, I want you to come with me. I want Daniel to meet the man I love. The man who's going to be around for a very long time if I have anything to say about it." Ethan's smile could have lit the entire hospital. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." They walked down the hallway hand in hand, no longer separated by wealth or position or past mistakes. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of a cruel joke and decided to build something real from the ruins. Just Lily and Ethan. Two hearts that had learned the hard way that love wasn't about power or control or transaction. It was about choosing each other, every single day, in hospital waiting rooms and garden paths and burned garlic bread disasters. It was about showing up, being present, being real. And as they pushed through the doors to Daniel's recovery room, ready to face whatever came next together, Lily realized that sometimes the best love stories don't start with a fairy tale. Sometimes they start with a mistake that becomes a lesson, a hurt that becomes healing, a bet that becomes a beginning. Sometimes the best love stories start when two people decide to stop hiding behind who they're supposed to be and start showing up as who they really are. And that, Lily thought as Ethan squeezed her hand and Daniel's eyes fluttered open with a weak smile, was the truest kind of magic there was. Sometimes the most profound transformations happen not in grand gestures but in quiet moments of choice. Ethan learned that true power isn't found in control, but in the courage to be vulnerable. Lily discovered that opening her heart again wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing she'd ever done. Together they proved that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, being real, and choosing each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. In the end, they didn't need a fairy tale. They just needed each other, flawed, honest, and willing to build something real from broken pieces. What about you? Have you ever given someone a second chance and discovered something beautiful on the other side of forgiveness? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what moment moved you most?